Welcome to the NativeScript show, where we cut right to the content without delay, just like the framework cuts to the platform. Starting in the top, Brad, what do you got?
I'm going to briefly mention the GitHub Actions and using a CI for plugins.
Very useful. Tiago, hello from Portugal. What do you got?
Hello. I am also going to talk about GitHub Actions, but using Fastlane to deploy applications to the App Store or Google Play.
Very interesting. Tyler, hey from Kentucky. What do you got?
Today I was ideally going to talk about some Fastlane stuff, so may just piggyback off of some of what Tiago is going to talk about.
Excellent. The GitHub is very hot. The GitHub Actions for sure has been a lot of talk about those. Alex, you got anything to share?
You can't handle binary data in JavaScript yet, but there's a solution for that. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Ooh, all right. You perked my interest. Dave, what do you got for us from New Hampshire?
What excites me most about NativeScript is the ability to access native platform APIs and utilize platform declarations in TypeScript to see API documentation right in IntelliSense.
That's excellent. Thank you for that. So we're going right back up to the top. Brad, talk a little bit about the GitHub Actions.
Yeah, let me share my screen really quick. All right, so GitHub Actions, it's pretty simple. They're just workflows. It's all YAML stuff. So here's the actual build file that I was going through. This one, for this demo app for the floating action button plugin, it's pretty simple. I just run it on push or PRs. You can change that to run scheduled and everything. So it's highly configurable. But for plugins, I'm just running them on the Mac OS. And then, as you can see, the steps, again, it's all simple. And basically, you check out the repo, set up Java, and then I have some scripts that are in the package JSON of the root of the actual repository here. And that's basically just installing NativeScript and setting up TypeScript for this specific plugin. And then I'm just linting just to make sure everything's okay when anyone makes a PR or a push to a PR. And then I just kick off a build for the demo app also here, which is just TNS build Android. So I'm not doing anything super fancy with CI on the plugins. I just try to keep them pretty simple. I do have some testing happening on the iOS side with the TNS test command you can see right here. And that actually does work. I have not figured out how to get the Android SDK and the actual emulators kicked off to successfully test Android just yet. So that's something I hope someone else possibly is working on, or I can get to it maybe next week. But that's it. Just building demo plugins with the GitHub Actions.
That is so much simpler than what I've traditionally seen with the shell scripting for Travis CI. Looks way easier to maintain. So you're just kicking off NPM scripts. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you can run NPM scripts and stuff. And the actual runners, the Mac OS, Linux, and PC runners that GitHub Actions, they come pre-installed with like the latest Node, the latest Android, and all this stuff. So you don't have to typically do a lot of configuration or setup. Pretty much everything. Xcode, I think, is the latest, so you don't have to like worry about Xcode unless you need a specific version. Then you can actually go in and configure things.
The actions that are at the top there for the steps, those are built-in GitHub Actions, pre-configured?
The actions here, yes. Those actually, I think, if it's actions / something, I think those are from Microsoft. Now, you can have them, anyone can actually build an action and publish it. So this could end up being, in Walker for your GitHub user and an action that you wrote that someone else might want to run.
So there could be an action someone could publish to install NativeScript and run, perhaps even an EDE test suite. Yeah,
you could actually.
That's what I was just going to ask.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. You can have so this could say, in Walker, set up NativeScript. And when they actually run that, it does everything for them because you've coded it in a JavaScript file or something. So it's pretty cool. You can use JavaScript, TypeScript to write your actions. It's pretty robust system.
Brad, could I ask how much of this GitHub Actions in general, because it seems to be running on a Mac in a cloud, right? Is all of this free to use, or do you have to pay?
Yes. If your repository is public, it's free.
Oh, what? So they just give you a Mac for free?
And and you can run up to 5 of the jobs. You see here, so you got your jobs. I have job 1 and job 2. These run at the same time. So this actually ran, I guess, last week or whenever I did the last push to this. But here are the 2 jobs. You can see job 1 and that's job 2. They run in parallel. You can have up to 5 jobs on a Mac OS running at the same time.
Now, can you publish these to the App Store then?
Yeah, and that's what Tiago, I think, is going to mention using Fastlane to actually automate the entire CI/CD part. So I won't go into all that.
Let me just add that there is also a time limit. So you have like 30,000 minutes of machine time.
Is that per certain per week, per month, or per repository? Per month.
Per month, yeah. And macOS instances are more expensive. I mean, it's like 1 minute in a macOS instance is like 10 minutes in Linux or Windows.
And do they give you all this time for multiple repositories or just one?
As far as I could tell, it was per repository.
Now, as far as running this on a private repo, is it included in a pro plan with GitHub, like an organization setup, or is the GitHub Actions kind of a separate upgrade?
I know. I think if you're a private and you're a paid plan, I think you have some time included for GitHub Actions. I'm not certain, but I think so.
Nice. Well, Tiago, why don't you continue? Brad, that is really excellent. And this makes me want to change all of our manual scripting CI stuff to that like tomorrow. Tiago, you're sharing something similar.
Yeah. So last year, I set up Fastlane to work with NativeScript. If you don't know what Fastlane is, it allows you to build your application and do all the signing and publish to the App Store or to Google Play. And it does that like with a single command, and it just works, and it tries to do as much as possible by its own. So this year I moved all that to a GitHub action. Right now my Fastlane configuration is running on a macOS instance. Whenever I push a GitHub tag, because that's how we set it up. So we push a GitHub tag, and it starts publishing the app. It builds the app for Android and iOS, does all the signing, and eventually it will upload the IPA or the APK, and even do the step of publishing that build for TestFlight or for the App Store.
Tiago, on Fastlane for the signing on iOS, do you do that through a repo that uploads the certs? I know Fastlane has the match provisioning.
Yes.
Is that what you're using?
Yes. That's kind of the best way to deal with signing, especially with a big team. So it's much easier to have like a central repository for all the certificates and provisioning profiles, and just let Match deal with that.
In your GitHub Actions, is there a special scripting that you're using to deal with the repo and as far as where those certificates are sitting? Is there anything special with the GitHub Actions you had to do to configure that, or was it just straight Fastlane commands?
Yeah. Just before that, I also have to install NativeScript, and then it does all that. Actually, I had to create like a Git basic authorization token so that it can use and can clone that repository. There is a bunch of secrets that we have to use, and we can set those secrets like passwords and things like that in the repository settings, and then we can just use that in our Fastlane. So all the secrets are stored in there. I even encoded the key store, the Android key store, as a base 64 and just paste it there. And then I am grabbing that secret, decoding back to the key store, and just use that. It's the fastest way to do it.
That's brilliant. In the future, creating some of that as a GitHub action that you could publish, do you see ways that you could take some of those NativeScript specific GitHub actions and publish it as a reusable action for others to use? Do you see ways to do that?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first, I will very soon write another blog post showing how to set all these things up, which, well, it's not that much now that I have figured everything out. But yeah, so you will be able to do the same. But I am also working with Dimitar. He has been working with cloud builds, and he started making a NativeScript plugin. So the whole idea is that we can set up Fastlane and then use several CI providers like GitHub Actions. He's working with Circle CI so that we can use that to publish the app through a plugin, which will be easier, to take control and to integrate with your project.
That is really exciting. Thanks for that, Tiago.
Okay.
Definitely. Tyler, thanks for coming. What would you like to expand?
I'm actually going to flip-flop. So I'll talk about some Azure Pipeline stuff. So instead of piggyback off of Tiago, I'll kind of go don't want to say opposite, but of Brad. So if you can't have your stuff in GitHub, kind of how you can do the same thing using Azure Pipelines. It's very similar to Brad's, just a different look. If your code's out in Azure, you can set up an Azure pipeline. Basically, you just have an Azure pipeline YAML file in the root of your project. There's a few different ways you can run. You can have it run off of a trigger, so off of a commit to a certain branch or any sort of that stuff. This started off as what I was using for some UI tests, and I didn't want them running on commit because they can take a little while. So you can schedule them. So just your typical cron timing for that. You can give it a display name, and then you can tell it what branches to include or to not include. And so we have some that just do some, basically our UAT or dev, and then our production one just running once a week. We don't commit to that often, so we don't need that happening every night.
Now, this format, obviously being YAML, it has similar commands as GitHub Actions. Mm-hmm. Is there similarities in terms of the commands that are here specifically that correlate with GitHub Actions, or is it something totally different?
I'm not sure. I've never really dealt with GitHub Actions.
Maybe that's more a question for Brad. Do you see anything in here where it cross correlates?
Yeah, setting up the jobs and then the steps. That is similar, but using task and script. I mean, some of that stuff's just different keywords.
Yeah.
I like in here the script that you have there as far as being clear on some of the scripting in there. I guess you could obviously call a NPM script there that could group together a bunch of tasks as well. Or yes. It's just nice the way you have it here being clear. One's running an install for one versus another.
Yeah, you could lump a lot of these all. A script can take a bunch of commands. So I could technically have my install node, install Angular, and install NativeScript all in one technical script block. I like it like this. It's a little bit nicer when you look at it in the view from the web, because then I can see, the install node step, the Angular step, and the NativeScript step.
Now, are you using Fastlane in this?
We haven't set that up inside of the Azure pipeline yet. Currently, we just kind of do that. We just run the manual Fastlane commands locally, but we're working towards moving that into the pipelines.
I was going to ask, does anybody know if AWS has a similar product they offer? I know a lot of enterprises use AWS, so I think that would be like interest to people.
I am not aware, but it does sound like they would. Alex, do you know anything about that?
I see something called AWS Code Pipeline. So they must have something like that, and I doubt that they would not. Yeah, usually they come out with stuff first, and then Azure is quickly on their tail as well with their stuff. So I'd be surprised if they don't, but I don't know any details about how to run that. That would be an interesting topic to cover for our next show.
Yeah.
By the way, since we're talking about Azure Pipelines, I just want to give a shout out to Tyler. He actually posted up an example on NativeScripting blog just a few weeks ago about his process, and he describes it in his post there. So you can go through it and check out that whole write-up on that.
That is really helpful to see, Tyler. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. This one is set up just for Android. I have another post I'm about to write probably for iOS as well, but maybe this could help Brad. I don't know if you want to connect after the call or something. Because here I set up an Android emulator on the whatever VM or machine that's going to run this script on. And then the last command is basically just to run the test Android command. So very similar to Brad's, just kind of a different layout, I guess.
Well, listen, thanks for sharing that, Tyler.
Yeah, no problem.
Dave, you got anything you want to elaborate on?
Yeah, well, actually, what I was going to show sort of demonstrates what Jamie was talking about a little bit. So what I had mentioned was sort of diving into native APIs, and I had done a video for Alex on nativescripting.com a while ago about customizing the UI tab bar on iOS, where you can turn the native UI tab bar dark in NativeScript with just CSS, but there's a lot more you can do with this control and all sorts of controls on both iOS and Android. And in this tab bar, you can do this thing where you can make it nice and translucent. I know you probably can't see it very well down here, but like if you open up the Trailers app on iOS, you can see it, both the action bar and the tab bar are black translucent, and it looks very clean and nice. And so you need access to native APIs to do that, because NativeScript doesn't give that out of the box. And so what I was just going to show is not only how to do that, but how to incorporate the platform declarations that NativeScript provides to access these native APIs. You can watch the video if you want to see sort of all the details about how to do it. I'll just quickly show these platform declarations, because when I found this out about NativeScript, I was just completely sold. Because not only do you have access to all these APIs, but if you've got your tooling set up right, you've got access to it in IntelliSense, which is awesome. So I've installed platform declarations in this project. And so here's how to do this dark tab bar, is you just grab reference to the object, and then every NativeScript view has an object off of that event, and then it's got an iOS object if you are running it on iOS, and an Android if you're running it on Android. And so what this returns on iOS is a UI tab bar controller. But that doesn't really mean anything to us in this context. So like right here, without platform declarations, I set it to any and I do dot, I get nothing, right? So I don't know what I can call off of this UI tab bar controller. But since we have platform declarations installed, you start typing and you can see all these different types that you can set. And so you can set it to a UI tab bar controller. Now you hit dot and you've got every iOS API off of that object. And so you do need to dig into the documentation a little bit, of which there's plenty. But if you do a little bit of research, you can figure out you need to access this tab bar and then the bar style off of that. And then you can set it to it's an enum called UI bar style, and see how it just shows up there. And then you've got all the options for the enum there, and you just set it, and that's it. And then what you get back is this sort of nice translucent black tab bar. And that's obviously a very simple example, but this sort of ability to get at these native APIs and call anything off of that not only gives you access to these native APIs, but even just sort of browsing in this IntelliSense can give you ideas about stuff that you can do with these controls that NativeScript doesn't give access to out of the box.
And it's really just fun. There's a lot of fun in working with the APIs on Android and iOS. Both of them are so rich, and it's amazing to be developing in that way with those APIs at your fingertips like that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's the most exciting thing about NativeScript to me. It was when I first found out about it, and it still is, just the fact that you can mess around. And the day iOS 14 comes out, you can expose some new feature in your app, and it's really incredible.
Did you have any issues like of conflicting with like the CSS styles when you do that?
I mean, so like that, what I had showed before, like you can do tons of stuff with CSS in NativeScript, as you know, but that only brings you so far. And at a certain point, if you want to get some view, Nathan and I work on this really sort of complex NativeScript app together, and they like a lot of sort of very interesting UI interactions. And sometimes we need to dig into the native APIs and implement on both iOS and Android to get exactly what they want, whether it's like a really fine-tuned animation or doing something with a view layer that you can't really do with a NativeScript layout. We can just basically create a utility to implement that functionality on both iOS and Android, and you're off to the races.
Thanks for that, Dave. This is very cool. Alex, did you have something you wanted to expand on?
We got two Alexes now, and I guess you're talking to me because I do have something to expand on that. And I started this off by saying you can't handle binary data in JavaScript yet. What I mean by that, let me expand on that as well, is, for example, I was working on a project recently, and this is for my YouTube channel, but I'm hoping this will help a lot of other people. If you have an image and you want to analyze that image is made out of binary data. How do you do that so that you can extract the average color of that image? And that's what I wanted to do. Now, in JavaScript, even though NativeScript allows you to use pretty much any JavaScript library out there in NPM and write JavaScript code, you can't really analyze a binary image unless you write your own library, and I don't know how to do that. So what do we do? What do we do that's simple? We come down to the layer underneath of that, which is the native layer, which can easily parse that image for you. Let's say I wanted to take this image right here, and I wanted to get the average color so I can apply a shadow of that same color to the image, to the underneath the image, and also that action bar there. How do you extract that color? Well, you can run some native code, and that's exactly what Dave was talking about, is you can jump down to the native layer, analyze that image, pass that image to the native layer, analyze it, get the average color, pass it back to your JavaScript layer in NativeScript, and apply that shadow and that action bar with that color.
That was gorgeous.
So that's what's really, really cool about NativeScript that you won't be able to do with other frameworks.
Now, when you were doing this, was there a moment that you had to hop into a different IDE or a different coding stack?
Good question. Absolutely not. So normally, for example, if you were writing this in React Native and you couldn't do something, you'd have to pop open Xcode, right? And you'd have to write a native layer to do that, and then you would include that in your project. Here, you don't have to, and I'll show you the code in a second. So you can see that this is a purple image. You got the purple application to the action bar and a purple shadow underneath of that. So let me give you an example of what that looks like. Here's the code for that. I'm not going to go through it. It's all in the YouTube video if you want to check it out. We have access to the native code directly here, specifically right over here. So we're using some really low down buffer types here. We're using reference type, and you can use this directly in NativeScript, even though these are C types.
In your research initially, when you implemented this, did you refer to iOS docs specifically, or did you find some Swift or Objective-C examples that showed this and you just coded it in NativeScript?
Yeah, I am not one to go looking around and learning this stuff before doing it. I just Google for what I want to do. I find a reputable answer on Stack Overflow, and I copy that code. Usually it comes in the form of Objective-C, and that's really easy to translate to JavaScript. But sometimes you find Swift examples, which are a little bit different, so you have to still translate it.
One thing myself and Nathaniel Anderson talked about years ago now, and this is really neat, Alex, is talking about the way that you just did that. And it would be really neat to, of course, come across an example and put it into a website converter and actually get NativeScript out on the end, take Objective-C, paste it in, and get NativeScript out on the other side. Same with Swift or Java. There's probably some possibilities to do that, but it is pretty straightforward, of course, when you're coding it straight. There's some exceptions on constructors and initializers in some cases, but this is really, really, really neat to see.
Yeah. So it is a little tricky, but for the most part, especially if you did what Dave was talking about, is install platform declarations. That's going to help you out a lot as far as code completion goes and using these native types.
Thanks for sharing that, Alex. It was very cool. I need to hire you to do that in one of our projects. Alex Vakralov, thanks for joining us. We are very lucky to have someone who's worked on NativeScript core and also a very talented engineer. Alex, is there anything in particular that you would like to share?
Hey folks, I'm glad to be here. I actually wanted to share a very special pull request that was recently got merged into the master of the NativeScript, and it's really special. Okay, I can just share my screen.
I'm excited. What is it?
We need a drum roll. We'll give a...
Oh, yeah.
Where's the sound effects board?
Yeah, we got him right here. Here we go. We're ramping up to hear it, Alex.
Okay, just can you see?
There
Can
we
you see my
go.
screen?
Yep.
Great. So
3D rotation.
yeah. So this was a really special pull request for two reasons. The first one, obviously, is because it's community driven. It was started by Hamdi, I think more than a year ago, and then Ryan had the guts to finish it out, take over the pull request. So huge shout out to those two folks that made it happen. And it's been quite a bumpy road because there were so many roadblocks for this particular one. But finally we got it. We can apply 3D transformations to NativeScript views, to any NativeScript views, and also we can do animations and all that fun stuff that comes with it. So yeah, this is coming out with the next release probably in a week or two. We're really happy to make it happen.
That's awesome. Alex must be jumping out of his seat right now.
Yeah.
I've been waiting for that one.
That's huge. Now, what release is that going into, Alex? Is that 6.4?
It's 6.4. It's already in the next versions, and we are preparing the release this week, so probably be out next or the week after. That
is very exciting. Thank you for sharing that. That's huge. I just noticed that Emil just joined us as well. Also has worked on the core team. Very lucky to have Emil. Emil, thanks. Do you have something that you wanted to share?
No, actually, I just stopped by to say hi, and I haven't been focused on NativeScript for the past couple of months, so just wanted to see what your guys up to and say hello.
Well, hey, thank you so much. And we miss you dearly, as always. Emil, very talented himself. And this has been a very rich first episode for sure. Some really, really interesting topics shared all around. Well, there you have it. NativeScript straight from the heart. And without further delay, we're out.